Hey guys, tonight we ease into one of those quietly unsettling corners of human history, the kind you don't usually hear about in class, mostly because teachers prefer you to sleep out of boredom, not out of existential dread. You can almost feel the dust of a small ancient settlement brushing against your ankles as you step into this world. There are no bars, no cells, no guards pacing behind iron doors. Instead, you stand in the open, the sky wide above you, and every eye in the community fixed on you. Because in a world without prisons, punishment is not something hidden away. It's something you live in real time, in public, in front of the very people whose trust you just broke. And honestly, you probably won't survive this with your dignity intact. But before we sink any deeper into this sleepy stroll through the past, here's a tiny request wrapped in ASMR silk. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And since I love seeing where everyone listens from, tell me your city and local time down in the comments. Because imagining all of you scattered across the world drifting off together to the same strange historical rabbit hole is honestly one of my favorite parts of this whole thing. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along a dirt path, guided only by firelight and murmurs. Before you even get to the punishment part, you feel the real machinery of pre-prison justice, the community. There's no sheriff with shiny boots here, only neighbors who remember your face, your family, and that embarrassing thing you said last festival. Justice moves through memory, suspicion, and the very inconvenient fact that everyone knows exactly who you are. Privacy hasn't been invented yet, much like deodorant, personal boundaries, or the modern miracle of keeping your embarrassing mistakes off the town bulletin board. In these early societies, think ancient Mesopotamia, small tribal groups, and early farming villages. The rules are simple. Steal something, and everyone will know by tomorrow morning, and the morning after, and the 10 years after that. Because the first line of punishment isn't violence. It's reputation, a currency far more fragile than your spine. In small communities, trust is survival. If you break trust, you're not put in a cell. You're pushed out of the circle of safety. That could mean fewer hands helping in harvest, fewer people willing to share grain during famine, and fewer allies when wolves show up at the edge of camp doing their nightly, "Hey guys, buffet," routine. A mainstream historical fact glides in here. Many early societies, like the Sumerians, relied heavily on restitution, not confinement. You stole a sheep, you give back two. You stole grain, you repay with interest. If you can't, well, we'll get to that cheerful nightmare soon enough. But for now, you're walking among people who believe theft doesn't just break a rule, it messes with the cosmic order. The land, the ancestors, the gods, they all get grumpy about it. And you know what happens when the gods get grumpy? Historians still argue whether the storms, floods, and droughts mentioned in ancient records were divine punishment or just really bad weather. But either way, you'll be blamed for it. So congratulations, by lifting a loaf of barley bread, you may have doomed the whole village's harvest. Tough start to your evening. You stand in the center of a circle now. The headman, or sometimes a council of elders, steps forward. Their job isn't to lock you away, but to decide what social shape your consequence will take. And sometimes, that shape is surprisingly creative. A quirky tidbit. In some early desert communities, thieves were occasionally forced to spend days sitting at the settlement's entrance so everyone entering could spit out a curse or toss a tiny stone at their feet. Not quite prison, but definitely the world's slowest, pettiest traffic jam. The decision tonight is the same as it often was in eras without confinement. How do we fix the relationship you broke? People are staring. Some look angry. Some look disappointed. Some just want this over with because they left their stew unattended at home and it's definitely burning. Restitution is, once again, the favorite option. If you stole something, you return it, plus extra. Sometimes double, sometimes triple. It's supposed to sting enough to make you rethink your career choices. No need for prison when the economic slap is loud enough to echo for years. But what if you can't pay? What if you're broke? What if your only asset is that slightly dented cooking pot your grandmother left you and the world's saddest goat who hasn't produced wool since the last solar eclipse? Well, now things get interesting. You feel a hand on your shoulder as someone suggests compensation through labor. Let him work it off, they say, in that tone people use when they're volunteering you for chores. Again, no bars, no walls, just the heavy, exhausting reality that your every sunrise for the next few weeks or months will now be dedicated to rebuilding the damages you caused. You chop wood, you carry water, you repair fences, all while everyone pretends not to watch, but totally watches. And if you mess up again, if you steal during your punishment, if your sticky fingers have the moral resilience of a wet leaf, well, then the community escalates. Here's where you feel the shift in the crowd. Justice isn't just about restoring what was taken, it's about preventing you from doing it again. Without prisons, physical restriction becomes a creative exercise. You might be tied to a stake for the day, not as torture, but as a sort of community timeout on hardcore mode. Some societies tethered repeat offenders with ropes that allowed movement within a small radius. It was like an ancient human loading screen, forcing you to stand still and think about your life choices. The sun beats down. Your legs ache. Someone's cow wanders over and sniffs your hair. A child giggles and asks if you're becoming a tree. And yes, somewhere in this moment of humiliation and boredom, you realize why this method worked. It wasn't about pain. It was about forcing you to confront the consequences while everyone else watches you marinate in regret. Historians still argue whether these community-based punishments were more humane than later prison systems. On one hand, they didn't shove people into overcrowded, disease-riddled cells. On the other, being tied to a pole while a goat chews your tunic is not exactly cruelty-free. You shuffle your feet, trying to stretch a cramp, and the rope tugs. Someone laughs, and you realize something. Punishment before prison is intimate. Too intimate. You can't hide in a cell. You don't get anonymity. Every consequence happens in full view of the people you'll see tomorrow at the well, the market, the next festival where you'll be dancing awkwardly because apparently rhythm hasn't been invented yet.
As night approaches, the elders finally release you. Your ankles burn, your pride is a shriveled raisin, but you're still inside the community, barely. And that's the whole design. Punishment doesn't exile you physically, not yet. It exiles you emotionally, socially, and reputationally. A punishment delivered without walls, but not without weight. The path home is dark, but you hear familiar sounds. Clay pots clinking, distant laughter, the soft bleating of that same rude goat now following you like it owns the road. Tomorrow, your restitution begins. Your debt will be measured not only in goods, but in hours of labor and awkward interactions. And although this world lacks prisons, it doesn't lack consequences. They just come differently, closer, more personal, and slower, like a punishment that breathes down your neck even after the official ritual is over. You glance back at the village lights. The night is quiet, but your story, your consequence, is just beginning, stretching forward into the next section without pause.
You wake the next morning to the soft shuffle of feet outside your door, neighbors already heading toward the square. The humiliation from yesterday still clings to you like smoke on cloth. And as you step outside, you feel something else too. Eyes. Not hostile, exactly, just curious. The kind of curiosity that makes you wish for the invention of sunglasses, hoodies, or at least the ability to turn invisible on command. But today, your punishment shifts shape. Last night was about exposure. Today is about performance. And no, sadly, it's not the fun, you're the star of a musical kind of performance. It's the you are now the main character in a very public morality lesson kind. And in a world without prisons, public humiliation isn't a side effect. It's the whole program. You trudge toward the village center, where everyone already seems to be waiting, as though your downfall were better than festival entertainment. Children are whispering. A few elders are muttering. Someone is handing out bread the way people now hand out popcorn before a dramatic scene kicks off. A wooden frame stands in the middle of the square, the stocks. Your stomach sinks, because even if you've never seen them this close, you've heard stories. You've heard how people trapped in these things look like human furniture. And if humiliation had a mascot, it would be this lopsided hunk of wood with holes for your hands and head. A mainstream historical fact settles in your mind. Stocks and pillories were used for centuries, from medieval Europe to colonial towns, not to harm people, but to display them. It's almost poetic in a sad, ironic way. When society couldn't lock criminals away, it locked their dignity instead. You're instructed to step forward. The crowd quiets. The wooden frame creaks open, and before you can overthink it, your neck slips into place, your wrists follow, and the top panel slams shut with a thud that echoes louder than it should. Your world tilts slightly downward. All you can see now are legs, shoes, feet, dirt, and the occasional chicken wandering past with absolutely zero respect for your situation. The breeze moves past your cheeks, and suddenly you become very aware of the fact that you can't scratch your nose. And of course, your nose begins itching. It's like the universe has a punchline ready at all times. A few villagers gather closer. They're not angry, just invested. You are, for the moment, both a warning and the spectacle. And that's exactly the point. Without prisons, justice wasn't hidden, it was showcased. But unlike modern true crime documentaries, there's no narrator here to defend you or explain your tragic backstory. You just stand, or rather stoop, in silent discomfort as everyone sees you as the sum total of one mistake. A quirky tidbit floats into your mind, something you once heard from a traveling merchant. In some French towns, people in the stocks had to endure children gently poking them with turnips, not as violence, but as a kind of symbolic vegetable commentary. You sincerely hope this village doesn't adopt trends from abroad. But it's not just vegetables you have to worry about. As the sun rises higher, the humiliation deepens. Someone snorts, laughing. Someone else mutters that your hair looks ridiculous from this angle. A few passers-by simply nod, as if to say, "Yeah, that tracks." It's amazing how quickly a reputation reshapes itself when your face is literally locked in place for everyone to examine.
And still, the punishment goes on. Public shaming isn't a quick thing. It's a marination, a slow, simmering stew of discomfort, regret, and too much unwanted eye contact. Time stretches, your shoulders ache, your lower back complains, your dignity files an official grievance. And somewhere behind you, that same rude goat from yesterday bleats loudly, as though offering its personal review of your life choices. A historian's debate drifts through your thoughts, one you once overheard from a scribe. Historians still argue whether these punishments were truly effective deterrents or simply social theater. Were people terrified of becoming the next person in the stocks? Or did they secretly enjoy the show so much that they forgot the moral message altogether? Honestly, watching today's crowd, you could argue it either way. Hours pass. At some point, a teenager approaches and asks, "So, was it worth it?" You can't turn your head, so you answer with the only thing you can, a very dramatic sigh. He nods as though you've delivered a life-changing speech and walked off. Teenagers have always been weird. The sun climbs higher, your skin warms, sweat gathers at your temples. But even as discomfort builds, your mind wanders. You begin noticing things you never noticed before, like the cracks in the wooden frame, the tiny scratch marks from previous offenders, the way people look at you with a mix of judgment and curiosity. It makes you wonder who else has stood here, neck aching, regret heavy, wondering if this whole thing was even worth the stolen loaf, goat, or trinket. A woman you know, someone you borrow grain from occasionally, pauses in front of you. She doesn't look angry, just disappointed. And somehow that bites more sharply than any punishment the elders could invent. She whispers, "Restore what you took, then restore your honor." And she's gone as quickly as she arrived. Honor. Such an old, heavy word. But in this world, it's relevant, vital. Without prisons, justice isn't about confinement. It's about equilibrium. Theft disturbs the equilibrium, and humiliation helps restore it, or at least reminds everyone that there will be consequences. You attempt a joke in your head, something like, "At least I can't lose my keys while I'm stuck here." It gives you a tiny burst of relief, a mental survival tactic, like making fun of your situation so your brain doesn't drown in embarrassment. Humor has existed for thousands of years for a reason. Humans need it when everything else feels ridiculous. As the afternoon drags on, the crowd thins. People have chores, markets, meals, and families. You become background scenery, like a decorative bush but with more emotional baggage. Some folks passing by don't even glance your way anymore, which is its own form of awkwardness. You're still suffering, but no one cares. You've become the world's least interesting attraction. Your neck starts to stiffen. You imagine how nice a pillow would feel right now, or even better, the invention of chiropractors, but no such luck. When the elders finally return, shadows are long and your body feels one solid ache. They unlock the stocks with slow ceremonial movements, the wood lifts, your arms drop, your neck straightens for the first time in hours. You groan softly, not from pain, but from the sheer relief of mobility.
The elder closest to you says, "You've been seen. Now you will repay." It's simple, clear. There is no further lecture, no angry speech. The public sees your humiliation. Now the community can move forward into the next phase, restitution. As you stretch your arms and feel pins and needles race through them like a parade of angry ants, you take in the square one last time. The scattered footprints, the tilted wooden frame, the place where you knelt. All pieces of a justice system that works without walls, locks, or guards. Just people, shame, memory, and the oddly powerful language of social pressure. You walk home slowly, arms sore, pride sagging like old laundry, but strangely grounded. The punishment has ended, but its weight lingers, a reminder that justice in this world isn't just performed, it's witnessed. And the witnessing, somehow, is the real sentence. Tomorrow begins the next stage of your consequence, but tonight you settle into the quiet knowledge that humiliation, as awful as it felt, was only the surface. There are deeper currents in this pre-prison world, currents of pain, deterrence, restitution, and community that you're only beginning to feel dragging you forward. And you know, with reluctant certainty, that the journey is far from over.
You trudge into the next day, muscles still sore from yesterday's stock marathon, and find that humiliation is only the first layer of pre-prison punishment. Today, the elders have introduced something new: pain as a lesson. Don't worry, there are no medieval torture chamber cliches yet. Think more along the lines of carefully calculated discomfort. A slap, a cane, a whip, not to maim you, but to make your body remember what your mind might still deny. And yes, you probably won't survive this emotionally without an internal eye roll or two. The village square looks different in the morning light. Dust dances in sunbeams like tiny lazy spirits, and you can hear the soft clop of goats' hooves on the dirt. Your arms ache from yesterday's wooden embrace, but there's no time to rest. A crowd gathers again, murmuring in anticipation, though today their tone is less theatrical. Today it's more clinical, like you've become a living case study. Mainstream historical fact: across medieval Europe, corporal punishment was standard for petty theft. Whippings, bastinado, which is essentially a fancy term for foot beating, and other forms of striking the body were intended to leave physical reminders of crime. Unlike modern incarceration, the idea wasn't to isolate, but to imprint guilt, literally, on your skin. You're positioned on a simple wooden bench, your hands tied behind your back, feet slightly apart. A local official, armed with a thin rod, approaches. There's a ritual to this. You feel each eye in the village following the tiny flex of your muscles, the twitch of your fingers, the way your toes curl involuntarily. Pain is both personal and social. Every slap is a broadcast. This is what happens when you disrupt order. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. In some cultures, especially in North African villages centuries ago, thieves' hands weren't just whipped. They were sometimes tapped with sticks dipped in lemon juice or pepper. The pain was amplified, yes, but the lingering sting reminded everyone of what theft tastes like. You can almost feel your own feet tingle just imagining it. Historians still argue whether corporal punishment actually reduced crime or simply reinforced social hierarchies. Were people afraid of the pain or just afraid of losing face in front of everyone who mattered? The debate hangs in the air, like the dust motes dancing above the village square. You suspect both, because fear of pain and fear of embarrassment are surprisingly sticky when combined. Your turn comes. You bend forward reluctantly, and the rod strikes your calves with a thwack that vibrates through your knees. The crowd gasps. A few children duck and giggle. You grit your teeth and try to focus on the goat wandering nearby. You swear it's smirking. Another strike. This time your shoulder protests. It's minor in a way, but in a world without modern analgesics, minor quickly becomes memorable. Pain has a rhythm here, not random, but orchestrated. Each strike is a punctuation mark on your misdemeanor. Your body begins to map the language of guilt. You flinch preemptively, anticipating the next mark. And yet, the most insidious part isn't the physical sting. It's the anticipation. That cruel little trick your mind plays, turning every second into minutes, every moment into a mini eternity.
You remember reading about bastinado, the foot beating popular in parts of the Ottoman Empire. It was a favored method for minor thieves. It left no permanent marks, but imprinted memory in your very muscles. Your toes, arches, and heels are messengers that never forget. It's strangely intimate. The crime isn't just on your record, it's written in your body. And here's the absurdity. The punishment is methodical enough to leave some space for humor. You make little jokes under your breath, too soft for the crowd to hear. At least I won't need leg day tomorrow. The thought makes you giggle quietly, which earns you a raised eyebrow from an elder and a faint smile from a child. Humor is a survival tool, especially when being whacked in public. Pain doesn't exist alone. It interacts with shame, embarrassment, and social memory. As you bend again, waiting for the rod, you see neighbors whispering. Some nod in approval, some just exchange amused glances. Every strike is an intersection of punishment and performance. And that's what pre-prison justice loved most. It wasn't about hidden suffering. It was about visible, undeniable consequences. A fringe tidbit. In some parts of early Japan, thieves received bamboo strikes not just on their backs, but on their shoulders while carrying heavy bundles of rice. Scholars still debate whether the rice was a reward for work or simply added cruelty disguised as rehabilitation. Either way, your imagination shudders at the concept. The final strike lands, and you wobble, leaning heavily on the wooden bench. Your legs feel like jelly, and your pride is dangling somewhere near your knees. Yet oddly, you feel a strange sense of relief. The ritual has an ending. Even if it is painful, it concludes. The crowd disperses slowly, leaving whispers and occasional snickers trailing behind. You shuffle to a shaded corner, flexing stiff limbs and feeling every small ache. This phase of punishment, unlike stocks, doesn't last all day, but the memory is intended to linger. Every time you lift something heavy, every time you walk over uneven ground, every time a rod-like object appears in your vision, your body recalls the lesson. And the lesson is simple. Theft has tangible consequences. In the absence of walls and bars, your body becomes a prison, remembering each misstep. As you limp toward the edge of the village, a neighbor mutters under their breath, "Better him than me." You can't help but nod inwardly. The wisdom is simple and cruel. Punishment is effective when it's witnessed, remembered, and felt. Physical pain is only the surface. The deeper currents are the shame, the social pressure, the anticipation, and the knowledge that everyone knows exactly what you did. And so you trudge home again, shoulders sore, heart slightly lighter, mind already mapping the next punishment phase. Because in this world, justice is never a single act. It's a continuous, unfolding experience. And the pre-prison system excels at making sure every moment of your existence reminds you there is no escape. Not from memory, not from community, and certainly not from yourself.
By the third day, you're beginning to understand that in this world, punishment is a long, winding story, not a single chapter. You've survived humiliation, endured physical pain, and navigated the whispers and sideways glances of a community that knows everything about you. But now the elders introduce the next tier, mutilation and lasting deterrence. Don't panic, this isn't the horror movie version of medieval cruelty. It's more controlled, ritualistic, and socially symbolic. Still, it carries a weight that lingers long after your muscles stop aching. You trudge into the square again, and the morning air carries a sharper tang, perhaps smoke from cooking fires, perhaps the faint scent of anxiety in the villagers. The wooden framework is replaced with a small, neatly arranged table, and a few sharp-looking tools rest upon it. You know what this means. Even before the instructions reach you, your stomach churns. In pre-prison societies, permanent marks were a way to signal guilt without cages. Your body itself became a ledger, written upon by communal judgment. A mainstream historical fact: ear cropping, branding, and other forms of deliberate, visible injury were widely used across Europe and Asia to mark repeat offenders. It wasn't merely punishment, it was a lifelong advertisement that this person had transgressed. You are now a living warning to anyone who might be tempted to lift someone else's bread, coin, or goat. The elders give their instructions, and you feel the weight of social eyes, every neighbor's gaze, a silent comment on your worth. A quirky tidbit: in some medieval French towns, thieves had their thumbs cut, partially or fully removed, not always to disable them physically, but so that every handshake would remind others that this person had once taken what didn't belong to them. Imagine greeting someone and realizing their hand tells a story older than their wrinkles. Historians still argue whether mutilation truly reduced crime or just instilled lifelong resentment. Did these marks prevent future theft, or did they create a class of permanently punished and socially ostracized individuals? You can almost see the debate playing out as you trace your fingers over your own trembling hands. You're instructed to kneel while an elder marks your forearm with a hot iron. The metal sears against your skin, but the pain isn't the worst part. The worst part is the permanence. You realize that every glance at your arm in future days will carry judgment. And yet there's a strange clarity here. No walls, no bars, but your body is the constant reminder of your crime. A fringe tidbit drifts in. In some North African and Middle Eastern societies, thieves were tattooed with symbols representing their misdeeds. These symbols were designed to be visible, almost like a walking wanted poster. You can't help but imagine explaining that to a future partner. Yes, this mark? Oh, that's just me being naughty in 1023 AD. You notice that your fellow villagers are watching quietly. The children are unusually silent. They are learning, perhaps unconsciously, that rules exist and consequences are tangible, unavoidable, and unforgettable. The psychological weight of observation becomes part of the punishment itself. You feel exposed not only physically but mentally, as if every thought of wrongdoing will be instantly punished. You are the living sermon. Never forget what your forearm tells you.
Pain blends with performance. You try to crack a joke under your breath. Hey, at least I won't need a tattoo parlor anytime soon. No one hears it, but the act of joking keeps your sanity intact. Humor, it seems, has always been a human coping mechanism. Even in the face of scorching iron and social scrutiny, it offers a small reprieve. The elder finishes the marking, and you stagger to your feet. Your skin is sore, your arm a new billboard for transgression. And yet, walking away, there's a strange sense of resolution. You are now part of a larger system, a network of symbols, stories, and consequences that pre-prison societies relied on. Every mark on your body ensures that you are remembered, not just by memory, but by the visible, undeniable trace of action. A mainstream observation reemerges. These punishments, though harsh by modern standards, were designed to be both corrective and preventive. They served as deterrents for the individual and as cautionary tales for the community. You, now marked, are both a lesson and evidence. You wandered to a nearby tree to rest, feeling the cool bark against your back. The marks sting intermittently, reminding you that history is lived in moments of discomfort, not just read in books. And as you watch the village continue its daily rhythm, children chasing goats, merchants shouting prices, someone trying to sneak a loaf of bread, you realize that justice without walls is constant, omnipresent, and inescapable. The sun climbs higher, and the shadows of your body stretch across the dusty ground. You think about permanence, about memory, about how your skin will carry this story long after the initial embarrassment and pain fade. The elders have achieved their goal. You will remember, the community will remember, and any future thief will glance at you and reconsider their choices. A fringe discussion drifts in your mind. Did such punishments cultivate obedience or bitterness? Were these marks social contracts or curses? Scholars still debate whether pre-prison mutilation fostered community cohesion or deepened social fractures. As you flex your arm and feel the swelling heat under the brand, you suspect the answer is both. Pain can educate, but it can also alienate. Even as you walk back toward your modest home, the villager's eyes tracking you without malice, but with acknowledgement. You notice subtle shifts. People nod respectfully. Children avert their gaze, but whisper to each other. The marketplace hums with daily life, yet you are inseparable from the collective memory of yesterday's theft. You are simultaneously part of society and a permanent warning within it.
You find a quiet spot under a low-hanging branch, lean against the rough wood, and breathe deeply. The pain will fade over days, but the lesson is designed to linger indefinitely. You reflect that in a world without prisons, the body itself became the prison, the punishment, and the cautionary tale, an intimate, inescapable classroom. Tomorrow, you'll learn how financial consequences further cemented pre-prison justice. But for now, you sit, sore, marked, humbled, and slightly awed at how ingenuity, human observation, and communal pressure can replace walls and locks.
By the fourth day, you begin to realize that the body can only bear so much, and the village's justice system is far more flexible than you initially thought. Today, the elders shift focus from physical punishment to economic restitution, the slow, grinding, inescapable weight of money and material compensation. In a world without prisons, fines, war guilds, and property-based redress become the backbone of justice. You trudge to the village square once again, wondering how much of your pride, sweat, and dignity can be quantified in livestock or grain. Spoiler, the answer is always more than you can imagine. Mainstream historical fact. Early medieval Europe, Scandinavia, and Anglo-Saxon England used wergild, literally man price, as a way to calculate compensation for offenses, including theft and even murder. Every action had a value attached, a number that could be debated, bargained over, or grudgingly paid, turning justice into a kind of painful arithmetic. You're instructed to sit on a wooden bench, this time with a small ledger-like tablet in front of you. The village scribe begins tallying. Stolen goat here, borrowed grain there, and of course, interest added for inconvenience and social embarrassment. You try to protest, but every squawk or mumble is met with a subtle stare that says, "Numbers don't lie, kid." A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. In some Viking communities, thieves had to pay not only the material value of the theft, but also a shame tax, a symbolic addition meant to account for emotional distress caused to the victim. Imagine that. Your crime comes with a surcharge for bruised feelings. You grimace. The concept of emotional restitution, centuries before modern law, feels both ingenious and vaguely insulting. Historians still argue whether wergild and similar systems effectively reduced repeat offenses or simply monetized crime. Did offenders learn morality or just learn to calculate costs? You scribble mental notes, wondering if you'll ever escape being an unwitting case study in historical accounting. The scribe's quill scratches against the tablet. Numbers multiply. You glance at the crowd, watching faces that once gawked at your stock's ordeal, now watching the arithmetic unfold. It's quieter, less performative, but the tension remains. Money, after all, is as public as humiliation. The entire community knows your debt, watches your attempts to satisfy it, and remembers your initial theft. You shift uncomfortably, realizing the irony. Here you are, physically free, yet more constrained than ever. Debt is a cage without bars. Every coin you don't have, every grain of barely owed, is a reminder that your freedom is conditional, temporary, and monitored. A fringe tidbit surfaces in your mind. In some North African desert tribes, a thief could avoid corporal punishment if they repaid their stolen goods in multiples, sometimes up to 5 times the original value. The community benefited materially, while the thief endured social and economic strain. You silently calculate your goat's value in modern terms and shudder. Your ledger finally completed, you are given the chance to begin repayment immediately. You're tasked with delivering grain to several neighbors, assisting with repairs, and performing various community duties. Labor now becomes intertwined with financial restitution. The stolen object's value is not just material, but embodied in sweat, time, and embarrassment.
You remember the goat from the stock ordeal yesterday? The one that seemed to mock you? Now it feels like an accomplice in your economic education. Every step you take in delivering owed goods is shadowed by your previous offenses. Each neighbor receives restitution with a look that says, "We are watching you, always." Historians still debate whether such material-focused punishments created equity or perpetuated inequality. If you had wealth, you could buy your way out. If you didn't, every misstep compounded. Pre-prison justice was egalitarian in theory, but often merciless in practice, especially for the poor. You nod solemnly, understanding that your social standing is now inseparable from your ability to repay. The afternoon drifts on as you trudge from house to house. Your muscles ache from previous corporal punishments, your arm still throbs from the brand, and your pride feels like it's been auctioned off alongside the stolen goods. But you persevere, because in this system, perseverance is currency almost as valuable as gold or grain. By evening, you return to the central square, ledger empty, but body and mind thoroughly drained. The villagers nod with faint approval. You have fulfilled part of your obligation, but the lesson is far from over. Restitution isn't just about replacing what was stolen. It's about demonstrating responsibility, accountability, and social reintegration. A whimsical thought drifts through your foggy mind. Maybe, just maybe, you'll start carrying coins in a small pouch forever, like a medieval survival kit. Because in a world without prisons, financial vigilance is the quietest, most persistent form of captivity. As you sit under the dimming sun, watching children chase each other and neighbors laugh softly at mundane tasks, you reflect on the ingenuity of the system. Humiliation, corporal punishment, mutilation, and now restitution, all interlocking, ensuring that theft is neither hidden nor forgotten. It's intimate, continuous, and inescapable. Tomorrow, your punishment will take yet another form: labor, service, and the transformation of crime into productivity. For now, you rest, knowing that your body, your wallet, and your reputation are all instruments in the pre-prison symphony of justice. And strangely, you feel a glimmer of understanding. This world has no walls, no bars, yet it confines more thoroughly than any modern jail ever could.
By the fifth day, you're learning that pre-prison justice is as much about work as it is about pain, shame, or money. Today, your punishment transforms into debt bondage, indenture, and forced labor, a kind of long-term, socially sanctioned apprenticeship in responsibility and restitution. It's one of those punishments that seems innocuous at first. You get to keep moving, your body is busy, and you're contributing to the community. But the reality is subtler, heavier, and inescapably binding. You trudge to the village outskirts, where a small farm is buzzing with activity. Fields stretch like golden waves, and the scent of tilled earth and growing grain fills the air. Here, you will labor for weeks or perhaps months, repaying your theft not with money, but with sweat and time. In a world without prisons, criminals became assets. Your hands, your arms, your very endurance now serve as currency. Mainstream historical fact: in medieval Europe and ancient Mesopotamia, debt bondage was a common response to theft, especially when monetary repayment was impossible. Offenders would work for their victims or the community until the debt was cleared, sometimes for years, transforming punishment into productive service. You start at dawn, wielding a hoe heavier than you expected. The sun bakes your shoulders, and the soil clings stubbornly to your hands. Every row you dig, every seed you plant is a tiny step toward clearing your moral and material debt. Your body protests, muscles screaming in languages you never learned, but your mind adapts,
finding rhythm in the toil. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind. In some coastal African societies, thieves were sentenced to work in salt mines or along riverbanks, essentially turning crime into public infrastructure projects. Your fingers are smarred at the thought of scraping dirt, salt, or clay, labor as social reparation. Historians still argue whether forced labor truly rehabilitated offenders or simply exploited them. Did work teach responsibility, or did it merely extend punishment under a socially acceptable guise? You glance at your aching arms and think that perhaps it's both. The labor is grueling, but it also embeds you back into the communal rhythm, linking your efforts to the well-being of others. Your fellow laborers are not strangers. They are neighbors, elders, and sometimes even victims of your theft. They watch your technique, correcting your mistakes gently, or with the occasional jab. The social aspect of forced labor is as vital as the physical. You are under constant observation, not hidden in a cell, but exposed in daylight. Every misstep a reminder of your prior misdeeds. A fringe tidbit. In ancient India, thieves sometimes served as bonded laborers for temples, performing menial but essential tasks like cleaning, carrying water, or tending sacred fires. Their work was ostensibly restorative, but also spiritually symbolic, a tangible effort to balance the karmic ledger. The idea that labor could cleanse moral depths feels strangely poetic in the middle of backbreaking work. As you dig, haul, and sew, your thoughts wander to the previous days. Stocks, whipping, branding, fines, all were fleeting in the moment. Forced labor, however, is immersive. It seeps into your daily existence. You begin to anticipate sunrise with dread and dusk with relief, a rhythm dictated not by freedom, but by obligation.
Humor becomes a survival tool. You mutter jokes under your breath. At least I won't have to lift weights at the gym, you say, imagining the irony. The goat from earlier might agree, if only it could understand sarcasm. Laughter, quiet though it may be, keeps your mind afloat amidst repetitive toil. The elder supervising your work occasionally stops to observe. A nod, a gentle correction, a reminder. Remember why you are here. Every word reinforces that labor is not merely practical, it is deeply symbolic. Your body is paying a debt, yes, but also learning humility, patience, and the rhythms of communal life. By midday, your hands are blistered, your back is sore, and the rhythm of labor feels both punishing and meditative. Forced work in pre-prison societies is designed to stretch punishment across time, making every day a miniature reflection on the crime and its social consequences. It is punishment without walls, continuous, tangible, and intimately tied to survival. A quiet observation. In many cultures, the end of forced labor wasn't just release, it was ceremonial. You weren't simply allowed to walk away. Your release was witnessed, acknowledged, and celebrated, reinforcing the social contract. You realize that every hoe strike, every row of grain, and every drop of sweat contributes to this larger narrative of reintegration and responsibility. By midday, your hands are blistered, your back is sore, and the rhythm of labor feels both punishing and meditative. Forced work in pre-prison societies is designed to stretch punishment across time, making every day a miniature reflection on the crime and its social consequences. It is punishment without walls, continuous, tangible, and intimately tied to survival. As the sun dips low, the labor ends for the day. You sit on a wooden bench, muscles quivering, mud caking your hands. The village seems quieter.
the fields stretching into a soft haze. Yet in this quiet, you sense a subtle transformation. Your body has become a ledger, your labor a narrative of restitution. The theft that began this chain of punishment now threads through every motion, every task, every glance from those around you. Tomorrow, the consequences will extend even further into the marketplace, the slave trade, and the broader world of pre-prison social and economic penalties. But for now, you sit, sore, humbled, and quietly aware that forced labor is more than punishment. It is a living, breathing, enduring reminder of every misstep.
The sixth day arrives, and with it, a new form of justice, social ostracism and community surveillance. By now, you've endured humiliation, corporal punishment, mutilation, fines, and forced labor. But pre-prison societies had another weapon, the slow, almost invisible weight of being watched, whispered about, and excluded. It's a punishment that doesn't hit your body directly, but lodges itself in your mind, a quiet echo in every glance and conversation. You walk into the village square, sun low in the sky, and immediately sense the shift. People aren't laughing today. They're polite, but distant. Friends avoid prolonged eye contact. Children peek at you, then run away, whispering secrets that might be about you, might be imaginary, but it feels the same. In a world without prisons, reputation was as important as physical restraint. Once tarnished, it could chain you more tightly than iron. Mainstream historical fact, in medieval Europe, exiled or shunned individuals were common. Villagers, guild members, and entire communities would practice ostracism to enforce social norms, effectively creating a behavioral prison without walls. Your crime wasn't just your problem, it became a story that everyone remembered and retold. You try to blend in, but every step reminds you, people notice. A woman closes her shop briefly as you pass. Two men stop their conversation mid-laugh. Your presence alone becomes a reminder of misdeeds, a living cautionary tale. A quirky tidbit drifts in. In some indigenous communities, thieves were forced to eat alone in public or perform meals with symbolic separation, so even sustenance became a stage for shame. Imagine having the snack with your guilt literally at the table. You suppress a shiver. Historians still argue whether ostracism truly rehabilitated offenders or just created long-term social fractures. Was the community safer because you were wary, or did it cultivate bitterness and resentment that outlasted the original crime? Walking through the square, you feel the tension between reintegration and alienation. Surveillance here is subtle but relentless. Neighbors keep tags. Who you speak to, how you work, whether you perform duties properly. Every action is recorded, not in a ledger, but in memory, gossip, and observation. Even small errors are magnified. Dropping a basket of grain, mumbling to yourself, or glancing too long at someone's possessions. You are always being evaluated. A fringe tidbit drifts in. In certain East Asian villages, thieves wore special marks or badges to indicate their offense, not only as a deterrent, but as a signal for community members to monitor their behavior. Social accountability became an invisible net, impossible to escape. You imagine walking with a neon sign flashing, "I stole once, judge me wisely." By mid-morning, the social pressure begins to weigh heavier than yesterday's labor. It's quiet, but your senses are heightened. Every whispered word feels like a verdict. Every casual look is a potential accusation. Even the village dog seems to wag its tail in judgment. You wander toward the marketplace, trying to appear casual. Merchants nod politely, customers avert their gaze, and you feel your status slipping further with each interaction. A small child drops a coin, and you pick it up automatically, heart racing, worried someone will accuse you of yet another theft.
Every act becomes loaded, every movement scrutinized.
Humor is still your refuge. You whisper sarcastic commentary under your breath. Ah yes, the invisible chains of polite society. So breathable. It's a tiny rebellion, a mental lifeboat amid the tidal wave of social scrutiny. Humor, once again, proves essential for mental endurance. As the day progresses, you understand the subtle genius of this punishment. Unlike whipping or branding, social ostracism works continuously. It doesn't end when the sun sets. It infiltrates your thoughts, your choices, your sleep, and even your dreams. The village itself becomes both jailer and therapist, silently reinforcing the consequences of theft through observation and exclusion. A mainstream reflection emerges. Pre-prison justice didn't rely on physical confinement alone. Social cohesion was enforced through constant visibility, expectation, and public memory. A community could punish without imprisonment, using shame and vigilance as deterrents. And today, you are the lesson in motion, observed by all, yet unable to defend or escape. By evening, the subtle pressure begins to erode your mental defenses. You retreat to a quiet corner, away from chatter, but not entirely from eyes. Even in solitude, you feel the lingering awareness that someone, somewhere, remembers your crime. This is a punishment without clear boundaries. It is omnipresent, slow, and intimate, weaving itself into the fabric of daily life. Tomorrow promises yet another form of pre-prison justice, ritualized public confessions and storytelling, where your crime will be recounted aloud, reinforcing memory, teaching lessons, and solidifying your position as a social example. For now, you sit quietly, feeling the invisible shackles of reputation, shame, and constant vigilance tighten and relax in rhythm with your every breath. The seventh day dawns with a new kind of dread. Today, your punishment moves into the realm of ritualized public confession and storytelling. You thought humiliation, corporal pain, branding, restitution, labor, and ostracism were enough. But now the elders reveal that your story must be told aloud, rehearsed and performed in front of the village, to ensure that memory, morality, and social norms are reinforced. Pre-prison justice thrives on narrative. Your crime becomes a living lesson, performed, repeated, and consumed. You trudge to the central square once again, the morning sun soft but sharp on your back. The villagers are already gathering. Unlike the physical punishments, this session is quiet, almost ceremonial. The community sits expectantly, like students awaiting a lecture, while you stand at the center, heart hammering in your chest. Mainstream historical fact: public confessions were common in medieval Europe, colonial America, and even some East Asian societies. Offenders were required to recite or recount their crimes aloud, sometimes in churches, squares, or guild halls. The process combined shame, accountability, and education, ensuring that the story of wrongdoing circulated widely. You clear your throat and begin, your voice shaky at first. You recount the theft in detail, what you stole, why you did it, and how it affected the community. Every sentence is measured. Every pause is deliberate. You notice nods from elders, murmurs from neighbors, and curious glances from children. They are absorbing the lesson, consuming the story as a moral text. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. In some English villages, thieves had to wear a placard with their offense written in rhyme and recite it 3 times aloud in the marketplace. It's part performance, part poetry, part moral lesson. You imagine your own story in rhyme. I took a loaf, it was a mistake. Now I work, my back will ache. You shiver at the thought, grateful that no rhyme is required today. Historians still argue whether public confession genuinely reformed individuals or merely shamed them. Did the repetition of wrongdoing ingrain guilt, Or did it simply turn the offender into a cautionary tale for social entertainment? You glance at the crowd, children leaning forward with wide eyes, and suspect the answer is both. As you continue recounting your theft, you notice the subtle interplay of memory and observation. The community knows the story, but your performance adds emotional texture. You include small details, the weight of the stolen goat, the smell of the grain, the awkwardness of being caught. Each sensory element transforms abstract wrongdoing into lived experience. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. In parts of Japan, shoplifters were forced to narrate their crimes while performing symbolic gestures of restitution, such as bowing or mimicking the labor they had evaded. The act of storytelling merged with physical embodiment, ensuring that lesson, body, and mind aligned. You imagine bending, bowing, and recounting with exaggerated gestures, grateful for your village's slightly less theatrical approach. The process is emotionally taxing. You feel your vulnerability magnified, exposed not just to scrutiny, but to empathy, curiosity, and judgment. Each word you speak reinforces your transgression, and simultaneously, your reintegration. Storytelling here isn't punishment alone. It's a ritual of accountability and shared moral consciousness.
By midday, the storytelling concludes. Elders offer feedback, sometimes corrective, sometimes approving. You are told to share the story in smaller groups later in the day, with children and new villagers who might not yet know your crime. The repetition ensures that the lesson propagates across time and space. You are not just punished, you are a living textbook. Humor still acts as your shield. You whisper under your breath, "Next time, I'll steal a chicken instead. At least it can't tell stories." It's a fragile comfort, but essential for preserving sanity in a system that thrives on memory and social attention. A subtle realization settles in. Pre-prison justice is multidimensional. The punishment is physical, social, economic, and now narrative. Each method reinforces the others. Your body, your reputation, your labor, and your story are interwoven into a persistent matrix of accountability. Escape is impossible, yet survival is achieved through adaptation, humor, and awareness. By evening, the village disperses, but the echoes of your story linger. Children repeat lines in hushed whispers. Adults recall your confession while performing daily tasks. The village has internalized your mistake as a lesson, ensuring that morality, law, and social cohesion are maintained without locks, walls, or cells. Tomorrow, the elders will introduce yet another layer, symbolic punishments combining all previous elements: humiliation, pain, labor, social scrutiny, and storytelling, culminating in a comprehensive pre-prison justice ritual. But for now, you rest, voice hoarse, body sore, mind buzzing, and aware that your crime has become a living legend, a cautionary tale etched into the community's consciousness.
The eighth day begins with an eerie sense of inevitability. You've endured humiliation, corporal punishment, branding, fines, forced labor, social ostracism, and public storytelling. Now the elders announce the next evolution of pre-prison justice: combined symbolic punishment, a ritual designed to integrate all previous lessons into a single, unforgettable experience. You trudge to the village square, wondering if your muscles, pride, or nerves can survive another day. Spoiler, they'll survive, but just barely. Mainstream historical fact. In many medieval European and Asian societies, ritualized justice often layered multiple punishments for emphasis, creating ceremonies where offenders face stocks, fines, labor, and public shaming in a single event. It wasn't sadism, it was designed to maximize deterrence, ensure visibility, and enforce accountability in a system without prisons. You arrive at the square to find a scaffold constructed for the occasion. The stocks are in place, a small table for fines rests nearby, and labor tools lie within reach. A crowd gathers, murmuring in anticipation. Today, punishment is choreographed, a social theater that combines pain, embarrassment, restitution, and observation. Your heart pounds, adrenaline mixing with dread and curiosity. A quirky tidbit, in parts of medieval Germany, thieves will be placed in the stocks while being required to perform tasks like sweeping the square or carrying water, turning physical discomfort into public labor and spectacle simultaneously. The idea? Crime is visible, labor is visible, shame is visible. You swallow hard, imagining balancing discomfort with chores in front of an audience. Historians still argue whether these combined rituals truly reduced crime or just entertained communities. Was the point to educate the offender, the observers, or both? Walking to the scaffold, you suspect the answer is all of the above. The ritual is as much about embedding morality into the crowd as it is about embedding guilt into you. You are placed in the stocks first, hands and head secured, legs spread uncomfortably. The sun beats down. The wood presses against tender spots on your wrist, and the crowd murmurs, some sympathetic, some scornful. Already this feels familiar, almost routine. You remember your previous days, whipping, branding, labor, and realize the scaffold is simply another stage in the ongoing performance. Next comes labor. Elders hand you a small basket of grain. You must carry it from one side of the square to the other while trapped in the stocks. Your body protests in every conceivable way. Every step is awkward, painful, and humiliating. You stumble and a child giggles. You can't help but smile. Humor is a shield, a small rebellion against relentless scrutiny. A fringe tidbit. In parts of North African and Middle Eastern villages, ritualized punishment required offenders to carry symbolic weights representing their crime, bags of grain, stones, or water, while enduring public observation. It's not just labor, it's a physical metaphor for guilt. You feel the symbolism in every strained muscle, every wobbling step, and every drop of sweat. After the labor, a scribe steps forward to read aloud your fines and restitution totals. You listen, nodding, pretending to keep count. Your mind drifts to the goat, the stolen grain, the embarrassment, the shaming gazes. Each element, physical pain, social pressure, economic obligation, labor, is now interwoven into a single, relentless experience.
Historians still debate the efficacy of these rituals. Did the combination of humiliation, pain, labor, and restitution create true rehabilitation, or merely a heightened performance of guilt? You feel both. Your mind is exhausted, yet you are oddly aware of the moral lesson etched into every fiber of your being. By mid-afternoon, you're allowed a short break. You sit under a tree, bruised, sore, slightly sunburned, and surprisingly contemplative. This hybrid punishment is exhausting, immersive, and undeniably effective. It engages the body, mind, and community. Unlike modern incarceration, which isolates, pre-prison justice immerses the offender in society, turning every glance, gesture, and action into a living lesson. Humor sneaks in again. You mutter under your breath, "Next time I'll just steal a stick. It can't complain, can't bite back." It's small, absurd, yet enough to keep your sanity afloat amidst the performance of your own guilt. As evening approaches, the ritual concludes. The crowd disperses slowly, leaving you alone with your bruises, your sweat, and your thoughts. You are exhausted, but enlightened. Justice without walls is continuous, intimate, and comprehensive, a constant reminder of the consequences of misdeeds. Tomorrow, you will learn how pre-prison systems used community enforcement and collective responsibility to extend punishment beyond the individual, binding families, neighbors, and even strangers into the moral web. For now, you sit quietly, muscles trembling, mind racing, and aware that the village has turned your crime into a living lesson for all.
The 9th day begins with a sense of inevitability that's heavier than any chain or stock could produce. Today, the elders introduce community enforcement and collective responsibility, a system that expands your punishment beyond just you, reaching your family, neighbors, and sometimes even strangers. In a world without prisons, society itself becomes a web of accountability, each thread reinforcing the lesson that crime affects everyone, not just the perpetrator. You trudge to the village square, feeling that the eyes of not just the community, but your extended social network are already upon you. Mainstream historical fact: in medieval Europe, Asia, and parts of Africa, families and clans were often held accountable for an individual's crimes, whether through fines, labor, or social sanction. Theft, adultery, or violence could ripple across households, ensuring that the consequences were communal and not merely personal. You notice subtle shifts in the villagers' behavior as you walk past. Children who once whispered about your misdeeds now glance at your family members. Merchants keep an extra careful eye on your parents' stalls. The message is clear. Your crime is not isolated. Its repercussions are woven into the community fabric. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. In some Scandinavian villages, a thief's kin could be temporarily barred from communal feasts, weddings, or religious gatherings until restitution was made. Essentially, social probation by association. You imagine your siblings missing cake and prayers because of your goat-stealing days, and cringe. Historians still argue whether collective responsibility truly deterred crime or bred resentment. Did families curb wayward behavior to avoid punishment? Or did communities merely spread guilt indiscriminately, creating intergenerational grudges? You glance at your family, silently promising to survive this long enough to restore both their reputations and yours. Your task today is twofold: labor with a larger group, and attend public assemblies where elders review ongoing restitution and monitor collective compliance. You were paired with villagers who weren't involved in your original crime, which adds another layer of discomfort. Every action, every misstep could reflect poorly not just on you, but on your extended social circle. A fringe tidbit: in some West African trading communities, a thief's debt could be assumed by guild members or neighbors temporarily, meaning your failure became their moral and financial concern until resolved. The intertwining of social obligation and punishment was almost Kafkaesque in its reach. As you dig, carry, and help build community structures, you notice the subtle psychology at work. Villagers now supervise one another, not out of cruelty, but as a system of mutual enforcement. Your labor, mistakes, and minor successes are all magnified through the lens of collective responsibility, creating an environment where community vigilance substitutes for walls and guards. Humor, as always, provides small relief. You mutter under your breath, "Guess I've invented the world's first unpaid internship, with shame included." Even in the midst of oversight, labor, and tension, your wit keeps your mind sharp and your spirit from breaking completely. By midday, the elders gather the groups for a formal inspection. They review completed tasks, count restitution, and assign additional responsibilities to ensure both justice and community stability. Your family observes silently from the sidelines, absorbing lessons in accountability, endurance, and social cohesion.
Mainstream observation. Collective responsibility in pre-prison societies ensured that crime had social consequences, not just individual ones. It tied families and communities together through mutual accountability, creating both deterrence and a strong sense of moral interdependence. By evening, you sit quietly outside your modest home, muscles aching, mind buzzing, and socially hyper-aware. The day's lessons have embedded themselves in every interaction, every glance, every chore. You now fully understand that, in a world without prisons, justice extends beyond the offender, entwining the entire community into the moral web, ensuring that theft is not forgotten, excused, or hidden. Tomorrow promises exploration of alternative, symbolic punishments, creative, ritualized, sometimes bizarre, but always reinforcing the social and moral contract. For now, you breathe slowly, letting the weight of community, labor, and collective vigilance settle like dusk over the village square. The 10th day arrives with a peculiar mix of anticipation and dread. Today, the elders introduce alternative symbolic punishments, ritualized, often bizarre, but profoundly effective in embedding morality and reinforcing social hierarchies. You trudge into the square, wondering what strange twist awaits you this time. Pre-prison justice, you've learned, thrives on ingenuity. The goal is never merely pain, it's impression, memory, and social teaching. Mainstream historical fact. Throughout medieval Europe, Asia, and Africa, offenders were often subjected to symbolic acts representing their crime, from wearing special clothing, carrying emblematic objects, or performing exaggerated gestures of penance. These were designed less for discomfort than for visible, memorable lessons. Today, you are handed a wooden plank carved with symbols representing your theft. You must carry it through the village while performing small labor tasks, balancing it carefully, all while narrating your crime aloud in rhythm with your movements. The weight is moderate, but the psychological pressure is immense. Everyone sees, everyone hears, and everyone remembers. A quirky tidbit. In some Japanese villages, thieves were made to wear inverted hats or masks representing their wrongdoing while performing public apologies. The act was often humorous to onlookers, but deeply shaming for the wearer. You suppress a laugh at the image, realizing your own wooden plank is your medieval equivalent of a guilt hat. Historians still argue whether these symbolic punishments reinforced genuine morality or merely created performance anxiety. Were offenders truly internalizing lessons or just learning to navigate elaborate social theater? You balance the plank carefully, thinking that perhaps it is both. Physical, social, and symbolic punishment blend seamlessly in ways modern prisons rarely replicate. You walk through the marketplace, and children mimic your gestures playfully. Adults nod quietly, some with faint smiles, others with solemn acknowledgement. Your actions are a public morality play, a continuous lesson in theft, accountability, and restitution. Each movement reminds you that every step carries weight, both literal and social. A fringe tidbit drifts in. Among certain North African tribes, thieves had to symbolically return stolen goods using effigies or tokens, performing gestures that mimicked restoration. It wasn't just theater, it was a tactile, physical embodiment of moral correction. You adjust your plank, realizing the weight of symbolism is heavier than the wood itself. By afternoon, you move on to a second symbolic task, constructing a miniature fence around a section of the village square representing the barrier between moral and immoral actions. You hammer, lift, and adjust, narrating each stroke as a lesson in communal vigilance. The physicality is moderate, but the repetition,
the public gaze, and the symbolic intent transform labor into living instruction. Humor offers small refuge. You whisper, "If only my parents knew I'd become a village architect specializing in shame fences." Even amidst scrutiny, symbolic labor, and narrative repetition, laughter threads a fragile line of sanity through your day. The elders watch carefully, nodding at your performance, occasionally correcting a gesture or prompting a louder recital of your crime. You realize that symbolism is social reinforcement, a bridge between punishment and pedagogy. It turns every action into a story, every movement into a moral lesson, and every observer into a participant in the collective memory of wrongdoing.
Historians note that symbolic punishments strengthened communal cohesion. By involving gestures, objects, and ritual, they embedded morality in shared experience, creating lessons that were internalized visually, physically, and socially. Unlike modern incarceration, which isolates, this method immerses the offender in constant, instructive observation. By evening, the rituals conclude. You sit, exhausted, wooden plank leaning against your shoulder, muscles aching, mind buzzing. You realize that in pre-prison societies, punishment is a continuous, layered process, combining humiliation, labor, social oversight, narrative, symbolism, and restitution, each element reinforcing the others in a seamless web. Tomorrow, the elders will focus on ritualized reintegration, the delicate art of restoring your place in society while maintaining the moral lessons you've endured. For now, you sit quietly, feeling the weight of wood, the weight of eyes, and the weight of memory settle into a strange, exhausting rhythm.
The 11th day brings a subtle, almost paradoxical challenge: ritualized reintegration into society. After enduring stocks, whippings, fines, labor, ostracism, public storytelling, and symbolic punishments, today is about reestablishing your place in the village, carefully, deliberately, and under scrutiny. In a world without prisons, reintegration isn't automatic. It is a structured, observable, socially mediated process that ensures you leave the punishment phase carrying both accountability and restored trust. Mainstream historical fact: in medieval Europe and many indigenous communities, ceremonial reintegration was crucial. Offenders often participated in feasts, shared meals, or were given small symbolic tasks to demonstrate renewed social commitment. It was a way to signal to the community that you were no longer solely a liability, but a functioning, accountable member. You are escorted to the square, where a small table with bread, water, and tokens of labor awaits. Elders explain that you will share food with neighbors, help organize communal tasks, and narrate your restitution progress. Each gesture, breaking bread, pouring water, lifting tools, is symbolic and public, signaling the transition from punished to participating. A quirky tidbit surfaces. In some Japanese villages, thieves were ceremonially given a cleansing task, such as washing the steps of a shrine to mark reintegration. The act itself was minor, but its symbolic weight, the literal and figurative cleansing of guilt, was significant. You bend to sweep dust from the square, imagining that each speck carries your past mistakes. Historians still argue whether ceremonial reintegration truly restored social bonds or merely reinforced hierarchy. Did the community forgive, or did reintegration simply formalize your continued visibility as a reformed offender? You smile wryly, realizing that visibility is both your sentence and your redemption. You move through the crowd carefully, distributing small tokens of restitution and performing chores. Children watch you with curiosity, some giggling at your awkward gestures. Adults nod, their expressions a mixture of approval and lingering caution. Even subtle eye contact becomes a measure of trust. How much of the old misdeeds still lingers in memory? A fringe tidbit. In medieval African trading communities, reintegration sometimes involved symbolic barter, where the offender would trade small tokens of value to neighbors who had been affected, reinforcing both restitution and social bonds. Your task of distributing small gifts echoes this, turning your actions into a visible, performative act of moral repayment. By midday, your tasks grow more interactive. You assist elders in small administrative duties, help children with minor chores, and participate in communal storytelling. But this time, the stories emphasize redemption, lessons learned, and restored trust. The community observes closely, gauging your sincerity, effort, and continued commitment. Humor once again threads through your mind. If only they knew I'm secretly hoping my goat could do some of this work for me. Small jokes keep your mind agile and your spirit resilient, balancing the weight of observation with fleeting relief. The day's work reveals an essential truth. Pre-prison justice never ends with punishment alone. True effectiveness lies in restoring social equilibrium. You are punished, you learn, you labor, you are observed, and finally, you are carefully reintroduced. Each step ensures that crime does not leave the social fabric frayed, and that lessons are internalized not only by you, but by the community observing your journey.
By evening, the reintegration rituals conclude. You sit quietly under a tree, exhausted but oddly uplifted. The day has demonstrated that justice in pre-prison societies is restorative as well as punitive, blending accountability with structured opportunity to regain standing. Tomorrow, the elders will introduce long-term surveillance and moral mentorship, the final layer of pre-prison justice designed to ensure the lessons endure long after immediate punishments have ended.
The 12th day begins quietly, but you already sense its weight. Today's lesson is long-term surveillance and moral mentorship, a final layer in pre-prison justice that ensures your misdeeds continue to shape behavior well after immediate punishments have ended. Unlike physical labor or public shaming, this punishment is subtle, psychological, and ongoing. It doesn't end when the sun sets, and it doesn't require bars or chains. Mainstream historical fact: in medieval Europe, parts of Asia, and African societies, offenders were often assigned mentors, overseers, or village elders to guide moral behavior for months or even years following a crime. This surveillance was meant not just to prevent recidivism, but to actively shape character, reinforcing social norms over time. You find yourself paired with an elderly villager who watches your every move, not aggressively, but attentively. Every chore, every word, and even casual gestures are noted. Advice comes gently, reminders to be punctual, careful with property, considerate to others. It's more subtle than stocks or whippings, but the constant presence is inescapable. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind. In parts of Japan, thieves would follow a watchful elder around for weeks, performing small helpful tasks and receiving quiet lessons in etiquette, honesty, and restraint. Imagine shadowing someone for hours, every minor action silently evaluated. Mentorship meets stealthy judgment. Historians still argue whether these programs genuinely instilled virtue or simply created lifelong anxiety. Did offenders internalize moral lessons or merely learn to perform morality under observation? You trudge alongside your mentor, wondering if anxiety itself is a teacher or just a permanent scar. Throughout the morning, you perform chores with careful attention, guided by subtle instructions. Your mentor interjects occasionally. Remember the story you told in the square yesterday. Mind your step while carrying that water. Think about the lesson of responsibility. Every comment reinforces not only past misdeeds, but the principle of continuous moral awareness. A fringe tidbit floats through your mind. In some African trade communities, mentors occasionally used storytelling to teach ethics, having the offender recite moral parables or comment on situations they witnessed. You practice recounting minor village tales, embedding ethical observations alongside practical tasks. The combination of story, labor, and mentorship keeps the moral lesson alive. By midday, the process begins to feel like a dance. Small actions, guidance, observation, repetition. Your mind is stretched thin, but slowly adapts. You notice that even small gestures, helping a neighbor, passing a tool carefully, choosing words thoughtfully, carry weight. In a system without walls, every behavior becomes a living ledger of morality. Humor helps you survive. Whispering under your breath, "I should start charging rent for all this invisible supervision." Small jokes ease tension, creating mental space to endure what would otherwise be oppressive vigilance. By afternoon, your mentor gives you a task to observe and advise others, turning surveillance into subtle leadership. You realize that the system is recursive. Having been watched, you now watch. By participating in moral guidance, you internalize lessons and learn to evaluate character in others. Accountability spreads outward, not just inward. Mainstream reflection. Pre-prison justice relies on time, observation, and social embedding rather than confinement. Mentorship, surveillance, and small duties create a prolonged, deeply personal experience of correction, reinforcing social cohesion and moral behavior over the long term. As evening falls, your mentor nods in approval. You feel exhaustion mixed with clarity. Your journey has been immersive, relentless, and layered. Today demonstrates that justice doesn't stop at punishment. It continues, shaping choices, relationships, and conscience long after the immediate spectacle has ended. Tomorrow, the elders will oversee the final ceremonial closure, the wind down that cements all previous lessons and prepares you for a return to unstructured life, albeit changed.
The 13th day arrives with a different kind of anticipation. Final ceremonial closure. After nearly 2 weeks of punishment, labor, social scrutiny, storytelling, symbolism, reintegration, and mentorship, today is the day when your journey officially transitions from offender to restored community member. It's a quiet, deliberate, almost theatrical process designed to consolidate lessons, signal your release, and demonstrate the community's approval, or at least acceptance. Mainstream historical fact. In many pre-prison societies, offenders were formally acknowledged at the end of their punishments through rituals, feasts, or symbolic gestures. These ceremonies reinforced social cohesion and closure, offering visible proof that the offender had endured, repented, and learned. You trudge to the village square one final time. The scaffold and stocks have been removed, replaced by a circle of elders and a modest arrangement of offerings, bread, water, and tokens representing labor and restitution. The atmosphere is calm, yet charged. Villagers gather, murmuring quietly, sensing the gravity of the moment. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. In some European towns, thieves were paraded in a ceremonial procession around the village with small symbolic items representing their crime, followed by applause or ritual gestures signaling their moral restoration. You imagine yourself walking with a basket of stolen grain, smiling nervously as the community approves your reintegration.
Historians still argue whether ceremonial closure reinforced true moral understanding or just created performative compliance. Did the ceremony ensure you internalized lessons or simply provide a social signal that the punishment had concluded? Standing in the square, you feel it is both, a mixture of reflection and spectacle, personal growth and communal reassurance. Your task is simple but profound. Recite a brief reflection on what you've learned. Symbolically hand over any remaining tools of restitution, and share bread and water with the community. Each gesture carries weight far beyond its size. Even the act of sharing sustenance becomes a public acknowledgement of accountability, empathy, and restored status. A fringe tidbit. In some West African communities, ceremonial closure involved the offender planting a small tree or flower in the village square, symbolizing growth, renewal, and a return to social harmony. You imagine that your minor gestures, lifting bread, pouring water, bowing slightly, serve the same purpose: visible, tangible markers of personal and social transformation. By midday, the elders guide you through a ritualized walk around the square, a slow procession punctuated with nods, subtle gestures of approval, and soft murmurs from neighbors. Children follow behind, whispering lessons learned from your story, curious about your journey, and keen to observe the subtleties of accountability and redemption. Humor, as always, provides a quiet lifeline. You mutter under your breath, "Guess I'm officially a model citizen until tomorrow." Even amidst solemnity, the mind seeks lightness, a gentle reminder of humanity's surviving scrutiny. By afternoon, the ceremonial acts conclude. You feel a profound shift. The visible punishments are over. The labor has ended. Social vigilance continues in subtler forms, and mentorship is winding down. The village has acknowledged your effort, observed your learning, and marked your transformation. You are no longer merely a cautionary tale. You are a restored participant in communal life. Mainstream reflection. Pre-prison justice is not a sequence of isolated punishments, but a continuum of physical, social, narrative, symbolic, and relational interventions. Closure ceremonies tie these threads together, giving both offender and community a sense of completion, continuity, and moral balance.
As the sun sets, you sit quietly at the edge of the square, reflecting on the journey. Every step, every glance, every gesture has contributed to a deeply immersive understanding of accountability. Tomorrow promises the final layer, a gentle wind down and reflective meditation, allowing you and the listener to absorb the journey's full emotional, moral, and social depth.
The 14th day begins quietly, with a sense of reflection and subtle relief. Today is the wind down and reflective meditation, the final layer of pre-prison justice. All the punishment, labor, storytelling, symbolism, social scrutiny, and mentorship converge into a calm, introspective experience. You sit beneath a tree near the village square, the sun warm on your shoulders, a gentle breeze rustling leaves above. There are no stocks, no planks, no public gaze, just you, the earth, and the hum of everyday life continuing around you. Mainstream historical fact: in many societies, restorative justice included periods of reflection, meditation, or quiet observation after formal punishments ended. The idea was to help the offender internalize lessons, regain mental balance, and transition fully into social reintegration. You trudge slowly to the meditation spot, allowing your muscles and mind to relax while still carrying the weight of experience in your thoughts. You close your eyes briefly and recall the journey, the humiliation of the stocks, the sting of lashings, the awkward labor, the watchful eyes, the wooden plank and symbolic fence, the mentorship, and finally,
the ceremonial closure. Each moment is a memory etched into muscle, mind, and spirit. The repetition of action, observation, and reflection has transformed your understanding of morality, responsibility, and the interconnectedness of community life. A quirky tidbit: in some African villages, offenders were given quiet mornings in nature to meditate, often with small rituals like scattering water or arranging stones to reflect on balance, order, and morality. You mimic the gestures, moving pebbles in a careful circle, imagining that each represents a past misstep now realigned into life lessons. Historians still argue whether such meditative wind-downs truly reinforced morality or were merely symbolic interludes. Yet as you breathe, observing the village's rhythm, the children playing, the merchants closing stalls, the birds flitting between branches, you feel a deep sense of clarity that transcends physical punishment. This meditation is not passive. It is the integration of all previous lessons, a quiet crucible in which accountability, empathy, and social awareness crystallize. The wind in the trees carries distant laughter, and for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, you feel a measure of calm. Humor flits through your mind, a subtle companion. So this is what freedom feels like, if freedom comes with existential reflection and pebbles to move. Small jokes continue to cushion the weight of experience, blending with the serenity of observation. You think about the community, how it watched, judged, taught, guided, and ultimately restored you. In a world without prisons, justice is not confined to walls or cells. It is lived, shared, and observed. The people who punished you are the same ones who now enable your return. Punishment, restitution, labor, mentorship, and ceremonial closure merge into a continuous, immersive process, leaving traces in body, mind, and social fabric. A fringe tidbit: in some European monastic communities, former offenders were assigned quiet reflective duties for weeks, such as tending gardens or copying texts, which symbolically and practically reinforced patience, care, and mindfulness. You imagine that even moving pebbles and observing life is a subtle echo of these historical practices, a bridge between punishment and inner growth. As afternoon turns to evening, your meditation ends gently. You rise, muscles still sore, body weary, but mind calmer and clearer. You glance at the village around you and recognize the seamless cycle: accountability, observation, restitution, and reintegration. You are no longer simply a thief. You are a participant in a complex moral ecosystem, one that has taught you lessons deeper than pain or humiliation alone. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story ends not with spectacle, but with reflection. Justice in a pre-prison world is immersive, continuous, and profoundly human, blending physical, social, narrative, symbolic, and psychological threads into an experience that resonates long after the immediate punishment is over. Slowly, as the sun dips beneath the horizon, you let yourself sink into a quiet awareness of everything you've endured. The world continues around you, the village children laughing, merchants closing their stalls, the faint smell of bread from nearby ovens. But for a moment, all external noise seems secondary. Inside, your body hums with memory: the ache of labor, the sting of lashes, the tightness of stocks, the subtle pressure of watchful eyes.
Every experience is a thread in a tapestry that is both heavy and illuminating. You reflect on the first days, humiliation, branding, labor, and physical punishment. Each element was immediate, tangible, unforgettable. You remember the sharp sting, the muscle fatigue, the biting embarrassment, and the humor you whispered under your breath to survive it. It's remarkable, you think, how human resilience finds cracks in even the harshest of circumstances. Humor has been a constant companion, a small rebellion against relentless scrutiny. Then came social ostracism and observation. The invisible chains of public memory pressed harder than iron bars, shaping your behavior in ways subtle and profound. You recall wandering through the village, noting whispers, averted glances, cautious nods, and the steady hum of judgment. It was a punishment without contact, yet profoundly effective. You realized that the human mind, when surveilled and remembered, internalizes lessons far deeper than any lash can reach. Public storytelling and symbolic punishments added layers of narrative, embodiment, and performance. Carrying planks, narrating thefts, building fences, and repeating rituals transformed abstract guilt into lived experience. You feel the weight of wood, the tension of observation, the subtle shame and learning embedded in every gesture. These acts were more than punishment. They were a pedagogy of morality, lessons taught in movement, speech, and interaction. Mentorship and long-term surveillance taught subtlety, patience, and reflection. Shadowing a watchful elder, performing small tasks, observing others, and internalizing guidance created a continuous, immersive lesson. Here, punishment became a relationship, a living dialogue between individual, society, and morality. Every small act was observed, every word noted, every gesture interpreted. The experience transcended immediate consequence, embedding itself into mind and conscience. Finally, ceremonial closure and meditation offered integration. Public acknowledgement, sharing bread, symbolic gestures, and reflective observation allowed lessons to crystallize, transforming hardship into understanding. Justice in a pre-prison world was not about isolation. It was about restoration, awareness, and community coherence. It blended punishment and pedagogy, visibility and reflection, social accountability, and internal moral reckoning. You breathe slowly, letting this full spectrum of experience settle into your body. Imagine the community, with all its eyes and subtle whispers, guiding you, observing you, shaping you, and finally restoring you. Every action, every laborious task, every gesture of shame or restitution, every whispered joke or observation has been a brick in the structure of accountability. And now the bricks are cemented, the structure stable, and you can walk within it with both humility and clarity. Humor remains, quietly, echoing, the imagined complaints, ironic asides, and small absurdities of the process. Even in reflection, you chuckle at the incongruities, a wooden plank as a morality teacher, pebbles representing transgressions, whispered guidance shaping decisions. Humor proves not frivolous, but essential, a balm for endurance and comprehension.
As night descends fully, your awareness softens. The village sleeps, the world quiets, and your own mind slows. The lessons of days, weeks, and experiences are not abstract. They're lived, embodied, and remembered. You feel both exhaustion and expansion. A body weary from labor, a mind shaped by observation, a spirit tempered by reflection. Finally, you realize the beauty of pre-prison justice. It is continuous, immersive, relational, symbolic, and restorative. It leaves no aspect of being untouched: physical, social, psychological, and moral. It is relentless yet instructive, humbling yet humane. And tonight, you carry the knowledge that punishment, when artfully constructed, does more than restrain. It teaches, shapes, and reintegrates. End of script. Sweet dreams.